I'm seeing this stuff. Nobody's believing it. Nobody believed they could hit darn near every installation in the country and be that organized. Well, they did. I remember walking to the TOC. That's the Tactical Operations Center, and it's our base. I mean, the headquarters here was really had been built as a division headquarters. And you go in, and we have what we call a set report. That's everything that's going on is on these boards. Nothing. 10 o'clock at night, it's quieter than we've never heard this quiet, and it's scary quiet. At midnight, all hell broke loose everywhere. Everything lights up. And the problem with it was there's so much of it, even no matter what your job was, you had 14 things to do at once. You can't do it. It's pandemonium. And I'm back, guess what? Back on the chopper, boom, back up to Dak To, which really was kind of silly because Dak To is a base camp. It's not what they really wanted to hit. And so it's getting some fire, but nothing much. It's, and I wasn't there. I was there a short period of time and then went back. And they're trying to move troops. We can't even do that because everything, they hit roads, they hit everything. And by the way, they proved a point, okay, that we were vulnerable and that we're sitting ducks, they're moving, and they're tactically quite good. But this was coordinated. Nobody thought that they could coordinate the NVA and the VC, and they did. And they did it darn well. Tactically, I'd say they'll be studying this one many years after we're gone and say, wow, how were they able to do that? It just was, it was special and how it happened, special in a bad way. But they did that, and then that it went to a sort of a crescendo, and then it kind of dies off. But they had made their point. I want everybody to know that you can't defend everywhere, but you got an enemy that's everywhere, and you can't be everywhere. Vietnam was, like my buddy used to say, it's a stinky war, but it's the only one we got. He said, and I guess, but all of us had our feelings, good and bad. All of us lost friends. My OCS class, actually, to be an infantry class, we were pretty lucky. I got to do some kind of neat things. When Westmoreland left, kind of my brain just went dead. The commanding general came in. He was an armored guy. Abrams. I knew he was going to come. Well, his son, it's kind of funny. His son was actually in the 4th. He had two. One went to West Point and was an officer, and the other one had gone to Armor OCS at Fort Knox. And I got to know him pretty well. He had been in some bad firefights with some tanks, and in Vietnam they weren't a real good tactical instrument because they couldn't get in the mud, and they get marred down. They happened in World War II too, but it was Vietnam was worse. They just couldn't. They had trees in front of them. They couldn't maneuver much, and so the day that I was supposed to brief General Abrams, you understand it? By the way, that day I got promoted to first lieutenant. That was kind of a funny thing. And all they did is because you're in fatigues, and they just take a magic marker and paint your broad black. So now you're lieutenant, first lieutenant. So I'd kind of cleaned myself up a little bit. And so I went back to headquarters, and I'm kind of walking, pacing around it. And his son says, "What the hell are you doing? So dressed up." I said, and I was very careful. I said, "I'm briefing the general today." And he said, "General Abrams?" This is his dad, okay? And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Oh, Tommy, he's a bear on briefers." I said, "I don't need this right now." The truth was, he was class. I mean, first, he was a soldier. I mean, he's incredible. And I had to brief him again. This is after all this is taking place on kind of capabilities now and what's going on. And I got a bunch of general officers in that, and I'm a first lieutenant. Typically, that doesn't happen. The majors and the lieutenant colonels want to do it because it helps their OERs, their officer efficiency reports. But again, I knew my stuff, and I was articulate enough that they knew I wasn't going to stumble. And although I don't mind telling you, I was a little nervous. I'd never briefed a 4-star general before. Okay. And he sat there with a big cigar, And I still remember it was, and I thought they'd kind of briefed him, and he said, General, he said to me, he said, Lieutenant, I understand you got a promotion today. Of course, going from second to first is like, drinking Kool-Aid. All right, I mean, it's a big deal. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, well, congratulations. He said, I'm sure there's a great future ahead of you, in this man's army. But it went over well. But the way he treated me, he did ask a few questions. And by the way, they were very poignant, good questions. I'd like to think I gave him the right answers, which he was appreciative of. And all these other officers in the world, every time a question's out, they're all going like this, And that's the military side of it. That's not the combat side of it.